doing a question and answer session with emergency responders years ago. Here comes the suspect vehicle, and he goes right past our officers. If you couldn't hear that, we just keyed up and said suspect left in a white Chevy Astro van. One victim is in the street, and then there's another victim in, I believe, the truck. And so now, and I'm not going to show this whole video because it goes on, but I'll kind of talk through it for just a few more seconds. Officers attempt to do a traffic stop on this vehicle. They end up chasing it up onto the highway. Once they get up on the highway, deputies ended up shooting at the tires, which you could hear shots fired. And then the vehicle ended up crashing or kind of crashing or parking at a school. And there was a standoff and negotiations, and the suspect was taken into custody. And hold on one second, let me see if I can pause that. Okay, so that is the video that kind of led to the question and answer session. If this was longer than an hour, I would play the whole video, but I really want to get to the question and answer session, as that's what I think people want to hear. So the first question, I'm going to pass it back to our officers, is if they had to describe a dispatcher in a positive way, using 2 words to describe them, what 2 words are the most important when thinking about a dispatcher? And you guys can go ahead and comment, answer the question yourself, and I'll also tell you my answer as well. So describe a dispatcher using 2 different words that makes up a good dispatcher. Go ahead.
I think there's a lot of good words, but the first 2 that come to mind today are be calm and concise. Mine's going to be clear, and then also smart, just to extend on that. So like the smart, you know, a lot of dispatchers you guys take tons of calls of service per day, speak with a lot of different people on the phone, and you start to understand when people call in, what type of calls we're going to be going to, what information, you know, we need that the people might not be saying. So for a smart dispatcher, you know, you guys would obviously ask those questions to gain that information that is going to be helpful for us as we arrive to a scene. And obviously taking the calls for service that you do, you'll begin to understand what those questions are. Clear on the radio, I think all of us can work on that, especially, you know, outside of the car, officers are kind of muffled. So it's always nice when, you know, you guys come across the radio nice and clear, easy for us to hear.
Yeah, and I like all the comments coming in. We can see those, so I should be able to possibly see any questions that you guys have as well. I definitely appreciate that. But I'm going to switch it back to the other side a little bit and say, what 2 words to the people listening make up a good officer? Are they the same words or are they different? You guys can kind of answer that question as we go about it. All right. So I'm going to ask another question to our officers behind us. As a responder, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not very annoying and 10 being very annoying, how annoying is it when a dispatcher tells you to stand by on the radio, and why is it annoying?
You said 10 was annoying, right?
10 was annoying, 1 was not very annoying.
I'm going to give it probably 6 or 7, and I think it depends on the situation that you're in. When out with a subject that we know possibly has a warrant, and you want to run him or want to run their 29 information. Sorry, we use 29. Run their date of birth and make sure that they do have the warrant. It sucks when the dispatcher tells you to stand by, because the more time you're out with this subject before putting them in handcuffs gives them more opportunity to look for a route to run, think about, hey, they're sizing you up, or you think they can take us, those type of things. So in that situation, I hate when the dispatcher says stand by. But I understand it when we're on just a normal call and the information we want to bring across isn't necessarily too important. Then to me, the number's obviously lower and they got more important or more calls coming in.
And yeah, I think I would agree with the 7, but it's always situational. At other times, I would say it's a 1. I mean, it's not always a huge deal. If we're just calling to get some information about a tow truck or something along that lines, it's not annoying at all. But because you've got a job to do, and we understand that. At least a good officer should understand that. I'm not saying that every officer is going to. You all know those officers that are like that, but I would say, yeah, when it's a situation like a warrant or just more high risk situation, it gets up there like 7 or 8. And like Tyler said earlier, a smart dispatcher knows the difference, knows what kind of call that officer's on, and that's where those numbers and those variances come in, where it's going to be either like a 7 or 8 on the annoying scale, or it's not going to be annoying at all. So.
And now I'm going to throw the question back to all the attendees, because this is an interactive session. You guys are doing great. Again, thanks for commenting. As a dispatcher on the same scale, okay, 1 to 10, 1 not very annoying, 10 very annoying. How annoying is it to you guys listening when a responder asks you if medical and fire are en route to a massive accident with several injuries? I'll just go ahead and let the numbers roll in here. And remember, the max is 10. The very first one, 100. Oh, look at the numbers come in. I just love it. That's how come this session is so much fun to do in person as well. And you guys are just making it awesome. I definitely appreciate that. Now, we're not going with 7s and being nice. Look at all these numbers come in. And I told you I'm going to ask these questions every single time. Oh, man, do I love it. I just absolutely love it. While you guys keep the numbers rolling, let me see if I can stop laughing here. All right.
Are they coming or not?
Yeah, they are on the way. Trust us. I want our responders to list one reason they think dispatch may make an officer repeat their radio traffic. What is one reason we may make an officer repeat their radio traffic? Go ahead, guys.
It's just inaudible. They weren't able to hear what the officer was asking.
And especially if you guys are running a couple channels, or for example, the people that run our name and date of birth are also taking 911 calls, so they might just not pick that up. So that's a pretty consistent reason that they might make you repeat. Or you could act like you have a donut in your mouth and they can't hear anything, which for some reason always happened to me. I don't know why.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys can hear them just fine. If you can't, go ahead and comment. I'll tell them to speak up, or we'll turn up the microphone. But the interesting thing, and these guys do not know, what they're leaning in for is they're reading your guys' comments. What they do not know is that I printed out their answers of some of these questions I asked before we went around and started doing this in person and everything else. And I asked that very same question. And this is when they first kind of came on as officers and everything else. And I said, what's one reason that you think we would make you guys repeat? And both of them did not say that answer. So you can make progress throughout the training when you train together, because both of them, it's kind of funny, said we may be eating in dispatch. So that was their answers, that we might be eating. And it's kind of funny looking back at that, because yes, we do eat at our councils and everything else. And their answer has changed as they've gotten a lot more experience. So training together is important, because before all they thought we did was eat, and now they know the real reasons why we're making them repeat. So the term that we use is blurting. In Iowa, I call it, maybe it's just me, I call it blurting. And what blurting is, I'll define it in case you guys use a different term, is where an officer keys up the radio and gives you the traffic stop, the location, the license plates, the number of vehicles, the reason for the stop, but never make sure that we're ready to copy as a dispatcher. So it'd be like, hey, dispatch, traffic stop, the 100 block of Main Street, 123 Adam Boy Charles. There's 3 occupants in the vehicle. Can you, and whatever else they say, instead of traffic stop, letting us say go ahead. So I'm going to ask them, either one can answer it, to give one reason why it may be necessary for an officer to blurt. And Melchert gave a really good answer in Davenport, so we'll see if they come up with the same answer. I'll let them go ahead with that question.
Do you get that answer wrote down?
I know your answer. You
did?
go ahead. Yeah.
One reason that might blurt, or a couple reasons. One, you jump out on someone with a warrant, and they just take off running immediately. So you don't really have time to give nice, concise directions, exactly where you're at, making it clear. Or you turn around on a vehicle and it takes off on you. So those are a couple instances where it's pretty hard to just, obviously the officer's adrenaline has jumped at that point, and they're trying to get out the information that they know they need to get out to help other officers know where they're at, and to help you guys obviously build the call and get a location, and to try to help get other officers there. Sometimes it just doesn't come across clear like we would like it, but it makes it tough when you see a person and they just take off running and you don't have time to get on the radio before that. Is that my answer?
Yeah, that was pretty much the same answer you gave in Davenport. Yep.
So it looks like someone said, but what about the ones who blurt all the time? I don't have a good answer for that one. They're just
Hands in the air.
not very good at their job, I suppose. But I'd say, Tyler, that's probably the most frequent reason why an officer blurts, at least in my experience. And I know I've done that numerous times. But another reason to kind of build on that is sometimes, like he alluded to in the previous question, that you guys are busy, you might be taking phone calls, even if maybe you tell us to stand by, maybe that situation has escalated. So in order to maybe try to get your attention from that phone call, or just try to, sometimes in my experience, there's been numerous officers try to get some information on like our information channel or something like that, and that kind of backs up, and the dispatcher will take them in order, which rightfully so. But if my traffic's more important than the 3 people ahead of me, I might blurt, and which they'll understand that most of the time. If it's probably going to be, again, one of those high risk situations. So
nice. All right, and you guys can ask any questions you want me to ask of them, but hopefully I'm hitting some home runs. I appreciate the comments, and I'm going to ask you to comment again here because I want how your agency does it. Yes, so I'll ask them that question. Thank you, Christy. Do we allow at our agency for you guys to come up, and this will be interesting because I know what the answer is, they may not. Do we allow officers to come up and sit and dispatch pre-COVID, and sit and dispatch and observe for a shift or work a shift up in dispatch? Did you guys do that as an officer, Belch, or have you done it yet, Delamuth, or can you do it?
I think in the academy we walked through dispatch.
Yeah, for like a half an hour.
I don't know. I might be. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but is it part of the academy now where they have to go sit and dispatch?
They've been talking about it. We haven't got it quite to the mandatory point, but officers at our agency do at least get a tour and about a 30-minute thing, but it is nowhere near long enough. And I'll talk a little bit more about our podcast, We Speak Dispatch, and some things that they do as soon as these guys get done with the answer. But their answer basically is unless you guys want to say more, we don't really do
No.
that. Yeah, okay.
No, that's the answer. No.
All right, so I'll take over. We asked this very same question on our podcast, We Speak Dispatch. We're on social media. You can go check us out on all major podcast platforms. And the same question came up, you officers sitting there. And one of the agencies in California said that it was mandatory for them to do it. And the officers actually had to talk and the dispatchers would type. So that when officers then would figure it out when they're on 911 and this traffic starts coming in and the dispatcher's sitting there saying, well, you got to talk to both. What are you going to do? And she said that their officers no longer complain about being told to stand by on the radio because they came up and they weren't even typing. The dispatcher was actually typing for them and everything else. It's so nice to see. Yes, we do have their sit in. We throw our new deputies talk, throw them in. And so that's what California said as well. And so hopefully that gives you some ideas to do it. The next question I'm going to ask them is, have you ever taken a citizen or a dispatcher, since we're talking about sit-alongs, on a ride-along? And if so, how many times did you take people on a ride-along and did you find it beneficial? Go ahead.
I'd say yes to both. I've had numerous citizen ride-alongs. They're usually people I know. I've had a couple. Our department does a citizens academy where people from just the community can go through like a brief academy, I guess. And one of the things with that academy is allowing them to participate in a ride-along, and I've had a few of those. It's been eye-opening to every single person that has ridden with me. I can definitely say that. I've had, you might be the only dispatcher that's ridden with me, and I'll let you tell that story, but
Yeah. If we get
it was a good time.
If we get to the end, I'll tell that story as soon as Melch gets done answering the question.
I'll go ahead. Like I said, the citizen police academy individuals ride with me. I didn't have any regular citizens outside of that or dispatchers, but it was beneficial for them to see what we do. And I know in our citizens academy, they also get to sit up and dispatch and listen to you guys. So I think that obviously helps the citizens understand what both sides are hearing and how we interact together.
All right. And this one is a story that Delmuth wants me to kind of tell is, anyhow, what happened was we were having major phone issues a year ago in August 2019, and they kept kind of crashing. We had to kept rerouting them to our backup site, and I was getting called in repeatedly to try and get that fixed. And what happened was I came back in, I just came home to take a quick shower. I'd been up most of the night before, and it was going to be another long night, and our phones crashed again. I'm sure other people can relate to some technology challenges you've had in the past. And I got called back in, we got set back up and our phones going, but I wasn't confident they were going to remain steady. So I went down and talked to the commander and just asked if I could go on a ride along. That way I was closer to the city and it would keep me awake and everything else, because I'd been up for almost a day and a half. And I ended up on a ride along with Delamuth, and he happened to get in a foot chase, and I could have at least opened the door and maybe hollered for directions or something, but I was so tired, I just said, good luck, go get him. So that's all I really had. I feel bad about it to this day. He still makes fun of me, but I'm a civilian employee, so I couldn't have done much anyhow. But at least I cheered him on. I gave him some, I tried to do my best to cheer him on, but that's all I really had. And then the backup officers, they must not put out a CAD message to let them know that I was riding along. So one officer came up and knocked on my window, and then he's like, what are you doing out here? And then why aren't you out of the car? And so I still get a little grief about it yet to this day, but that was an interesting one. So we talked about foot chases just there. So it kind of leads into the next question. I'm going to ask about car chases, and you guys can repeat, so I'll keep commenting, because it's awesome to see. But during a car chase, to the officers behind me, should the dispatcher repeat the information that's being said by the officer, or should they listen most of the time and only clarify things that are necessary to keep the radio open for the car chase? What do you guys think?
Personally, when I was in car chases, I did not like if the dispatcher would continually say the street that I was on, especially if you're in close-in neighborhoods, you're changing streets a lot. I think it makes it very difficult for the officer to stay focused on what he's doing if he keeps hearing the street that he was just called out, uh, being recalled out by the dispatcher. I do understand if it's hard to understand what road they may have turned on, or to clarify, for the dispatcher to, ask for that clarification. So to me, I like it when it's, major. So if I'm saying, hey, I'm getting on the interstate, I'm going to be heading southbound, maybe the dispatcher will say, they're getting on the interstate from this road or something of that nature. But for them to call out, if I say, didn't stop at this traffic stop or this traffic light here, and the dispatcher repeats that, I don't think they need to repeat that at all. They just need to type that in the call, so that way when I go to do my report, that information's in there. Most dispatchers that we've had, I feel like they've done a really good job with it. A lot of times it's lo and behold, the officer that you need to kick off the radio.
Took my answer.
I figured. Yeah. So, like I said, I like to have the radio when in a car pursuit, because it changes so quick. That extra 2-3 second transmission can, overlay what I needed to say. So the less radio traffic to allow me to talk, the better.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. That is pretty much my answer as well, so I won't get long-winded with that. But one of the big things too, we're our own worst enemy at times, and one of the things I hate the most is when other officers get on the radio and say, I'm en route, I'm en route, I'm en route. Like, we know you're en route. Just stay off the radio. But yeah, I do like the occasional repeat of important information. Other than that, yeah, just typing it in is the most beneficial, so we can go back and see, okay, they ran a stop sign here. They ran a stop sign here. One thing I will say, more information, more radio traffic from you guys is beneficial when sometimes we leave our jurisdiction. We've had some vehicle pursuits where dispatch will get on the radio and be like, hey, you got a right turn coming up. This is the street you're on. Because a lot of times we don't have counties out there yet, or different jurisdictions out there to help lead that pursuit. So a lot of times, to your benefit, you can really help us out.
And one of the interesting things is this is where the discussion and the training comes in. And I even see a few of the comments about, well, wait a minute, don't we repeat other information for officers to assist? And it's my job, based on their answer, to do a little bit better job at understanding and explaining why we do repeat some of that information from a dispatch perspective. And the interesting thing about it is the dispatch radios are usually much more powerful. And so they may think they came across, but they may have just came across to us and not across to other officers that might be in a jurisdictionally topographical area that maybe their radio's not picking it up. So I do think that important information should be repeated. But again, work with your agency to determine the best answer. This is a question and answer session to just start the discussion, because hearing their answer would be different than mine. And the other thing that I found interesting is when I was with the podcast thing, California gave the answer that they repeat back traffic because a lot of times they're in areas where the other troopers that are working can't hear anybody but dispatch. And they wouldn't even know the chase is going on unless dispatch repeated it and everything else. So knowing that information, and see, they're also kind of spoiled a little bit because our radio system where we work is very dynamic, very steady. And so they do appreciate if the radio transmission is clear as us being off the radio. But it sounds like I got some work to do when I go back as far as educating why it's important that we do that. And I'm seeing some of the comments on here that say the same thing, but it's also really awesome to hear their opinion as well. What's the single most important question? And I'm going to wait for a comment or two to come in. So this is kind of a tricky one, and I want to keep it a little lighthearted. So don't answer just yet behind me, but what's the single most important question a dispatcher can ask on a call reference to a domestic violence call? Single most important question a dispatcher can ask on a call reference to a domestic. And Teresa Winnery is already getting in there. And I did set it up, and Dawn's coming in, and it's interesting to see it go back and forth between location and weapons. I'm going to ask these guys for their answer as well, and then I'll tell you some more information on it. You guys got to go ahead and keep commenting. Go ahead.
So I know when we first answered this question, it was 100% weapons. Joe threw it over our head, and it's location, obviously. Can't get there if we don't know location. So
yeah. And I do like to ask that question in classes because I set people up to say weapons first, but it's a good reminder that just address and a lot of the protocol type things, if you use emergency medical dispatch or fire, or police, or something else, a lot of times they also do start with the, thanks, Dawn. I was assuming the location was already known. Like I said, that's on me. I set that question up on purpose just to kind of, like I said, keep it lighthearted and everything else. I'm going to try to bring my screen up here, so just bear with me here for just a second. See if we can't do this here. All right, there we go. And they remember from seeing it that the fire is, house is on fire. Oops, hold on. I told you I'm trying here live. This is interesting. I just messed it up. So hold on here. Just give me a second.
Right there.
Yeah, right there. All right. There we go. I clicked from the beginning the first time. Now we're there. So I'm going to ask a question, and I may take it over and just ask. You guys do size ups, and you can go ahead and comment back to me. Size ups when fire responds on scene, and how do you describe that house that's on fire? And I'll go ahead and describe how our house or how our fire department would describe it. And they would say, I'm on scene of a ranch style house with flames and smoke showing out the back side or possibly the C side. I don't know if you guys have ever heard letters described, but I'll go ahead and have one of our officers describe how we use letters to describe houses.
all right, so yeah, like Joe said, I don't know how everyone does it. Some people do it by numbers. We do it by letters. So the A side of the house is always the address side. The address side that more times than not faces the street. Sometimes it's weird and it doesn't, but the address side is the A side, and then it goes B side, C side, and D side in a clockwise manner around the house.
Yeah. So it looks like some other people review that. And if you've never heard that before, or maybe you're listening to fire dispatch and you hear a house and they need assistance to the, the A, B corner or the D side or whatever it might be, or the 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe you just use directions, the north, south, east, west. So I always like to cover that because sometimes people have heard the letters or numbers being described, but they don't actually know what it means. And if you don't know what it means and your agency uses that, make sure that you talk to them so that you can get them help if they're ever trapped inside a house, because you may be one of the only ones to hear that radio transmission. This is an interesting one, and I'm sure it'll be different at every place depending on if you're isolated away from your responders or if you're a super large agency or whatever. But I like to ask the question just to give a follow-up point. So I'm going to ask these guys, do you know the names of every dispatcher that works in our agency?
I could probably I probably know the names, but I probably couldn't put a face to everyone. I could put a name and a face to everyone that works nights, but probably not during days.
Yeah.
I'm opposite. I know faces, but I'm not good with the names. Good with the voices. I can always tell whose voice is whose, but just can never put I'm good with the faces, like I said.
And I like asking that question because to me, and maybe you have to follow your own agency policy, and maybe you'll disagree with me on this, but I always think it's a little bit easier to dispatch if we know the officers or firefighters, and our firefighters, we don't get to see that often. So it's hard, and we have about 230, I think, in our department. But when you hear an officer's voice that you recognize in normal terms, and then all of a sudden they hear a little bit of stress in their voice on the traffic stop, dispatch is aware of that the more we know each other. And I encourage officers to get to know dispatchers to get to know officers. To me, it makes you better at doing your job, as long as you're using it for beneficial information. That kind of goes along with ride-alongs as well. But follow your agency policy. Like I say, this is just question and answer session. And maybe you work at a place where officers aren't allowed to come into dispatch. I understand that as well. I've been there as throughout my career as well. So here's an interesting one, and it'll get some discussion going here probably. The shift ends at 2100 hours for the officers, not for the dispatchers. This is make-believe. We'll say the shift ends at 2100 hours. A report call comes in for your area of responsibility, beat, whatever you call it, jurisdiction, whatever, the area you work in, or you're the closest caller, doesn't matter. The time is currently 1 hour before you get off work. It's a cold report call, and you're available. We don't have calls pending. It's a perfect world, right? Should you be sent to the cold report call, or should it hold for the next shift? And what is the cutoff time to send you a cold report call before you end your shift? You go all the way up to the last minute, or how do you do it? And you guys can go ahead and comment how long it is before they get off. Send them. What about? Okay, go ahead. So you guys go ahead and answer that question.
Personally, I don't like to get held over if I don't have to. So I would definitely like it to wait to the next shift, but I also understand the reasoning for why some of those cold report calls don't get held over. Obviously, customer service is a big thing to keep the citizens happy, and you know, it could be we get off at 2100, the other shift might not get out of roll call until 21:30 hours, get their car loaded up. It could be 21:40, 21:45 before they're even logged on. So I understand if it gets sent out. It just sucks sometimes when your number is the number drawn to take cold report.
Yeah, I'd say an hour is a pretty decent amount of time for most cold report calls. You're not gonna have a suspect or anything like that typically, at least up front. But yeah, an hour I think is plenty of time to take that call. I'd say when you start getting around the half hour mark is when you're going to start having a lot of unhappy officers. But,
yeah. And I like all your guys' answers. You can see there's a lot of differences, and that's how come I had you say your agency. Some are saying, let the Sarge on shift decide. I agree. We do that sometimes all the way up till it's the last minute. Dang, you're getting paid. You work until then. The call came in. When you're still working, you get sent. I just love seeing all this feedback. This virtual setting is working well because we're getting more feedback even than when we do this in person. You guys are doing awesome. We've got a few more here to go. And this one's an interesting one. But I'm going to have them answer it differently than what our policy is. I'm going to have them answer it based on how long they think it should be, and then I'll tell you what our policy is. How long is it at your agency? And you guys can go ahead and throw up the minutes again. How long is it at your agency before you check the status of an officer or law enforcement official on a traffic stop, or do you check status at all? How long should the dispatcher wait? Go ahead.
well, this is an interesting one. I would say 1.5, 2 minutes tops. I challenge you to set a timer and actually see how long of a time period 2 minutes is. I'll let Joe elaborate on this, but this question really came up when Joe did the ride along with me as well. We were actually out with a wanted subject, and I'll let him tell more about it because he's better at telling the story than I am. But yeah, on a traffic stop, I'd say 2 minutes. A lot can happen in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Austin on that. And I think too, you might have a set standard of 5 minutes or whatever your department policy is, but it's also important to listen to the officer's voice when he calls out that traffic stop. It might be a vehicle that he recognizes from a dope house or something, and some people in it that he recognizes or she recognizes that they've had interactions with that. When they call it out, they might have a little shakiness in their voice, or it might be a little more amped up. So it might be worth checking on them in a more timely fashion than what the department policy is.
Excellent. And then the question I have is, should it be the same time or longer or shorter for a domestic call, or should all status alarms be the same? What do you guys think?
For domestic?
Domestic.
Yeah, I'd say probably for domestic, once you're on scene, I'd say a good, I would probably say anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes, probably 5 minutes, to do kind of like just like an initial status check. Um, Going back to the traffic stop one, officers also should be good at telling you when they're code 4.
Code 4 for us is no assistance needed.
Yeah, my apologies. So yeah, I think officers can do a better job of telling you that, and then getting into a good routine of, okay, yeah, this officer's good at that, and it normally takes them this long to do a traffic stop. Or on a domestic, I would say from time of arrival, probably 5 minutes, not from dispatch time. Especially if you're taking that call and you know that there's certain violence associated with it, or there's a known offender, there's recent calls to that address for the same thing. There's been arrests there in the past, or there's any mention of weapons. I'd say 5 minutes is plenty of time for a high risk call like that.
Okay. And believe it or not, we've only got 15 minutes left, so I'm going to try and pick my favorite questions unless you guys want us to ask a question. Thanks for all the comments, the wide variety of times from 3 to 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I saw 15 minutes. I saw, it's set up automatically on CAD, and even if it ticks people off, and I love seeing that answer, Joyce, because it is our job to check on them, make sure that they're safe. Your guys' answers, congratulations to all of you. For checking on them. I like seeing it varies on call type, so some are different. 3 to 5 minutes seem to be about the winning time frame for everybody. So just seeing how everybody does it and what the differences are. But I would make sure that your law enforcement officials know how long that time is, or maybe work with them to determine the time frame to set those, because if they're expecting to get checked on at a certain amount of time, which they shouldn't expect, but they should at least know how long it's going to be, in my opinion, to do that. So one of the things I've spent a lot of time talking about the last 2 days is attitude. And I'm trying to find the question here, but I'm just going to word it because I can't see the exact words. Is it obvious to officers working out on the street when a dispatcher has attitude over the radio? Can you tell the difference, or can you not tell the difference and just think that they're busy?
There's definitely some dispatchers you can tell when they've had either a bad day or are just not happy with the way things are going that day, that they have short attitude. And it goes both ways. There's officers that are that way as well when it's not the exact way that their day is supposed to go. They can definitely come across pretty rude. And you're just trying to get your information, so it kind of sucks when you're on the butt end of that, but at the same time you guys have to deal with it on our end as well. So
okay, we're going to ask Matthew's question. Thank you, Matthew. Do you as officers ever feel like dispatch is telling you what to do or being controlling? This does not include telling you where to go. That's our job. I love that phrase. Thank you, Matthew. So does it ever feel like dispatch is being controlling and trying to do more than just dispatch?
Yes, but I also think there are certain times where dispatch needs to take control of the call and the radio from where they're at. Sometimes, especially, I guess I've noticed it with younger officers coming on the street, or maybe too many officers trying to do too much on the call. The dispatcher needs to retake control of the call and get the information out. Sometimes you got officers saying too many different things, and I think as a good dispatcher that's listening, they retake control of the call and put out the proper information that's needed, go back to the main part of the call, re-put out what exactly we need, and try to cut down the radio traffic to keep the call less confusing for officers that obviously don't have the computer in front of them anymore.
Okay, and I'll let Delamuth answer this next question. Rather than letting them both answer, I want to get as many questions in as I can. There's an auto accident barely in the city limits, and a deputy rolls up on scene first in the county that it's in. In your agency, does the deputy take the report or call for a city car to respond since it's in the city?
Well, I know for us, they're gonna call and wait for us. They'll sit on that accident until we get there, which is extremely annoying. Your car says county of, which is the county of the city that you're in that accident. So it it also depends on the officer, but most of them, most times, are gonna wait for that city unit to get there. Um, we're both gonna have our varying opinions on that because it goes both ways. Um, that just kind of sets it up for the next time there's an accident just on the other side of the county line that we come across. We're gonna be waiting for you. So it shouldn't be like that. We should just be better officers and do our job.
I'm going to throw this one to Melch. I'm going to keep going quick, like I say, to get as many questions as possible. Do you know the entry order of how dispatchers at our agency need to enter information to run a warrant check on a subject, and how we like that information given to us so we can type it in as you're saying it? And do all officers give it to us the way we need it?
Yes. Well, no, not every officer gives it the way that they need it, but for the entry, it's last name, first name, year of the date of birth, month, and then day is how our CAD system is set up. And then obviously there's some officers that don't give it that way. I don't know why, but it just seems normal to give it that way. So I don't know why they don't.
Yeah, that's interesting because our state, we enter it name, last name, first name, and then year, month, 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day. And I see Tennessee from Joyce's name, sex, race, date of birth. So that would be different from us. I definitely appreciate it. And then do your officers always give it to you in that order so you can type it in as they say it? But we got another question from Teresa. I want to get all your questions in. Thank you, Teresa. This one can go to Delamuth. What is your thoughts when an officer pulls up to a scene and does not see the complainant and immediately tells dispatch to call them back? Before we can even finish dialing the number, the officer says, "Oh, wait a minute, I found them."
Well, I think in some situations when your dispatch will call and they say, yeah, their complainant's going to be waiting outside, or complainant's going to be at this location, you show up and they're not there. Obviously, I think that officer, maybe you've got one in particular that you're thinking of, should do a little bit more in trying to locate that complainant. But if it's kind of like a high risk situation, or like weapons are involved or something like that, I'm not going to put myself in harm's way to go locate that complainant.
You know, we spoil them sometimes. I dispatch it. We definitely do. And my favorite also is when you finally talk to somebody else that's not the person or the caller, and they have us look for some suspect or something like that. And then we make the call. We're really busy. We're talking to them. We're like, "Hey, our officers are on scene. They're unable to locate that vehicle." And then we key up and we say, "Yeah, you're a block away from it. It's right down the road." And the officer keys up then and tells you, "Yeah, I found it." And you, in the meantime, you've been making that phone call the whole time, but they told us to call, but never then told us they found something. So that's why I like asking that question as well. Yeah, ours don't even tell us they found the complaint. Antoine and Tanae, thank you for that, because it's very much similar to us. I'm going to ask 2 more questions, then we're about out of time. Name something a dispatcher, tell us something a dispatcher does to make your job easier that you really appreciate that we do. What's something we do to make your job easier? And I want both of you to answer that one.
One thing that you guys do is get the necessary information for every call that we go to. I think our dispatchers do a pretty awesome job at knowing what information we need to be successful. I also think we have some dispatchers that they become familiar with addresses, they become familiar with names of people, and they will recognize that name and say, "Hey, this person has this history," even though the officer may know that already. an assisting officer or a newer officer on the street may not know that. And I think that's good to put into the call if you know past history with that individual through the different calls that you've had with them.
Yeah, I would say another thing would be just keeping up to date on new information that's coming in. That's always extremely helpful. A lot of times there's some dispatchers that'll just type it into the call. Sometimes it's easier to hear over the radio than it is to read our computers about what new potential information was relayed from the caller.
Awesome. And this is going to be my last question of the day, because I want to make sure I end and tell you guys thank you. And I also liked Teresa's comment here. At the end of the call, officers make their own documentation into the MDT or MDC, whatever you guys have. It's that from a dispatch perspective, we really appreciate that, rather than coming over the main channel and giving us dissertation Dave and everybody and everything you said and did on that call when we're really busy. We like the comments in the calls from a dispatch perspective. I think that's very
It's appreciated
helpful.
from an officer standpoint too.
I don't want to listen to that crap either.
That comes to the point again where stay off the radio if you don't need to be on the radio, because another officer could be in a situation at any moment. So another officer tying up that traffic and saying something that's completely unnecessary to say on the radio, it could just be typed in. It's just unnecessary.
And one of the things that I started this question and answer session for was because I don't feel that dispatch gets a lot of closure. We take a lot of emergency calls, and we envision these things, and we send the officers, our deputies, our firefighters, whatever it is that you dispatch for, and we struggle to get closure to know what's really gone on. And I've appreciated these guys. I kind of got a chuckle out of a few of their answers. They've done a great job, and appreciated all the comments reading. That's what makes this so much fun. But the bridge that I'm trying to build and to close is to give dispatchers closure on calls. So I'm going to ask these guys, after you go on a major incident, pre-COVID, when you were allowed up in dispatch, do you go up and just ask the dispatchers, how are you doing? You got any questions about this? And only if you're able to do this at your agency. Maybe it won't happen right away. Maybe it'll happen like a week later in the parking lot, anywhere. But my question is, do you check on your dispatchers after you've worked a major incident?
I would say not every incident, but there are a lot of times after something, major call or a foot chase or something like that, I've gone up and talked to dispatch and thanked them, because there's a lot of things that wouldn't have gone as smoothly if they weren't there to kind of be my guidance. But yeah, major incidents, I know we do some debriefings where dispatch is usually allowed into those to give their part of the story and their opinion. But I know that in my experience, they do really appreciate going up there and telling them how a call actually ended. On another note, there are other times where I've gone up and apologized
That's right.
for, like, let's say a foot chase or something like that, where if I was blurting or I just really wasn't giving good information or something like that, I probably go up there more to apologize than I do to give closure.
Yeah, a lot of times, basically what Austin said, and then I've had it where the dispatcher has sent me a message and asked, how the call went or what happened on it, and I'll make a point to go up and talk to them and tell them everything that happened, so that way they get closure on it. But basically what Austin said, same thing here.
All right, you guys, hopefully that hour seemed to fly by. If I did anything, it's to try and get a discussion, or these guys did anything. It's hopefully, and you guys did stuff by commenting. Hopefully it's that it's opened up doors and you've realized how important it is to have those question and answer and not be afraid to have those discussions. Building trust is what helps build relationships. Did I agree with everything they said? Nope. Did I agree with the majority of it? Yes. And have they came a really long ways from the first day we started? Yeah, they really have. And I'm beyond proud of them for walking into a dispatch training and being willing to give us answers that they maybe knew might receive some criticism back or anything like that. They've traveled with me all over, and we've done that. And I thank all of you guys for commenting and keeping the session live and interactive. I have had an absolutely great time with you guys all 3 days. Tina, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's going to be the only day I think I really push myself. I'm on Facebook at 911 Gold Line Training. If you liked it, go give us a review and say the question and answer session was awesome. I would appreciate that. I'm on Twitter at 911 Gold Line TRG, Instagram 911 Gold Line Training. And I'm also part of the We Speak Dispatch podcast. If you like that on Facebook as well, you'll see us more often and give you a lot of ideas. Tina, it feels great to be with you guys. And I hope that this in a virtual setting was beneficial to everybody. And I hope tomorrow is a great conference ending for you guys as well. I can't thank you guys enough for having 911 Gold Line Training be a part of your conference. So thank you, everybody. I'm probably trying to come back on.